Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to do this, Heather. My name is Deb Figart. My title at Stockton is Professor of Education and Economics, and the reason is because I have an interesting history here at Stockton. I came as an economist to our economics program as an associate professor. I had gotten tenure once before at Eastern Michigan University, but I moved to Stockton for a lot of reasons. One, we are a smaller school and a better school, and because of the reputation of our general studies and interdisciplinary studies program. And then after doing a lot at Stockton and getting promoted to full professor and getting asked to co-chair Middle States and having a wonderful experience there, I entered the search to become the national search to become our dean of the graduate school. So I was dean of the graduate school for 7 years. And then in looking for a new home, the School of Education embraced me. And now I'm working on economic and financial literacy issues as an economist in our School of Education, and I've been there 2 years. I'm also I'm in the middle of my third 3-year term as co-editor of a top economics journal in social economics and non-mainstream economics and in heterodox economics, and it's open to feminist economics research and a lot of voices in the discipline. And the title of the journal is The Review of Social Economy. And editors serve terms for most journals, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And I just finished the first year of my third term. So I have been editor of this journal now for 7 years, going into my 8th year. So I want to talk today about what it's like to be a journal editor and give you a behind-the-scenes, inside-the-scenes look with some advice on how to publish in journals and what editors are looking for. And if you know me, and some of you know me and some of you don't, I am incredibly honest and transparent, and I want to help you and I want to give you advice. So I'm just going to lay it all out there about what editors are looking for because I believe in helping people move up in the profession. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I have a top 10 list of advice for you, but first I have a couple of slides by way of introduction. And this is a picture of the typical journal review process. And it starts with your initial submission to the editor. And now I hate to inform you, and perhaps you know already, that just because you send a manuscript to the editor doesn't necessarily mean it's going out to referees. Editors and co-editors and associate editors have to screen that manuscript to see if it fits with the mission and the scope of that journal, the other things that journal has published in its history of volumes. And if it doesn't fit with the mission of the journal and the scope and the aims of that journal, and it doesn't look like it speaks to the literature for that journal, the editor will issue it a desk rejection, meaning coming from the editor, it'll bounce it back. He or she will bounce it back to you, and that enters into the rejection statistics. The other thing the editor has a choice of doing, or associate editors, is if they think it fits, if the topic is interesting, if the way you're going about it is interesting, if it has some potential, but it's not yet ready to go out for the referee process, what an editor can do is coach you. The editor can spend some time with the manuscript and write some things down and make some suggestions for you in a fairly short period of time, a week, 2 weeks, usually no more than 3 weeks, and coach you into how to make the manuscript better so that it can go out for review. So, assuming that it passes those stages and it goes out for review, it is either sent out for review by the editor to referees, or it's sent to a co-editor or an associate editor. Different journals have different hierarchies, and then it's sent to referees. Then referees, and we can talk later about being a good referee and how to be a good referee. Referees spend some time with the manuscript. Sometimes it's 2 referees for a journal, sometimes it's 3 referees for a journal. And the referees take their time going over your work very, very carefully and issue the referee reports back to the editor or the associate editor, whoever assigned them the manuscript. And then it comes time for the referee to make a decision for the editor. And the referee has some choices. The referee can accept your manuscript straight away, just as it is, or with very minimal changes. The referee can suggest rejecting your manuscript because it's considered by the referee to be weak, or even though it passed the fit test by the editor, it doesn't pass the fit test by the referee. Or, this is extremely rare, the direct accepts, extremely rare. The rejections, it depends upon the journal and the journal's acceptance rate or rejection rate if you flip it. This is the most common letter you will get from an editor. It is a revise and resubmit because the referees say something like, this paper has potential, and the referee writes a very long report suggesting what could be done to improve the manuscript. And the editor has to read these referee comments very carefully because the referees can disagree with one another, or one referee can say you really need to spend more time on the literature review, and another referee could say you really need to redo the model, and the editor has to judge and make a decision and suggest to you what to do. And when you revise and resubmit your same paper on the same topic to the journal again, the process goes all over again. So it is not uncommon for you to get a revise and resubmit letter, for you to send the paper back to the journal reviewers and referees go through it again. Then you might get another revise and resubmit letter, and you'll have to go through it again. Or if you're lucky, you'll get an accept letter, either as is with minor revisions, but it is also possible, and this has happened to me, and it's very discouraging, that you go through a revise and resubmit, you send a paper back, the referees look at it again, the editor looks at it again, and you know what comes next? The rejection letter. So then you start all over again with a new journal. And all of those things happen, and they take time. They take time. Referees need time to do their job well. And in Q&A or later we can talk about referees. The second slide is definitions of the reviewing process, and then I'm going to go through my top 10 list of advice for you. Terms you may or may not be familiar with. Double-blind refereeing. Double-blind refereeing is the most common when you're trying to publish a referee journal article. Double-blind means you as the author do not know the names of the referees. When the report comes back to you, they come back as referee 1, referee 2, referee 3, or reviewer 1, 2, 3, ABC. The referees also, in a double-blind process, do not know the name of the author. This is considered the fairest process for all kinds of scholars, junior, senior, scholars of different genders, scholars of different levels of seniority in the profession, scholars from different disciplines, interdisciplinary scholars. It is considered the fairest process. However, there are journals that have single-blind refereeing. You do not know as an author the name of the referees in single-blind reviewing, but you know what? They know your name. The editor always knows your name because you're submitting to an editor, either electronically through Manuscript Central or Scholar One or some process, or you're sending an email to the editor. But the referees in double-blind do not know your name. In single-blind, they do. So you can see the problems here. for junior scholars, for the privilege given to scholars with big names. Sometimes, and there has been research on this, the privilege given to scholars with male-sounding names as opposed to female-sounding names. One of my favorite and best colleagues in the profession that I am in, the economics profession, as a feminist economist, has published with her initial only and then her last name. And she has a nickname that's part of her last name, but nobody knows her first name. I do not know her first name, and I'm a friend of hers. The other option is with special issues of a journal or invited papers. Usually the papers are also refereed, which is good. You can put it on your CV under refereed papers. The referees themselves often include the special issue editors because they're the one putting the special issues together. The journal in this situation may share the names of the referees with the author, or they may not. It depends upon the editor of the journal and their policy. It depends upon what the special issue editors want to do. And with invited papers where an editor or a special issue editor invites a paper, usually from a senior scholar, obviously they know each other. Single versus multiple submission. Just so you know, and you do know this, a lot of journals do not allow you to submit to multiple journals at once for the same paper. It's considered the largest violation of professional ethics ever. Now, there are some journals in the sciences, particularly, that will allow you to multiple submit because it's a race to publish a new laboratory experiment or a new innovative something or other that's discovered. So it's okay to multiple submit, and the first one that takes, if you decide to go with that, fine. But in most cases, you have to be patient, one journal at a time. If you are ever found to have multiple submitted, and I am an editor and I have found this in cases, it is entirely possible not only to suffer a rejection for that paper, but for the journal editor to never consider another paper from you again. And you don't want that to happen. So now I've handed out my top 10 list of advice for you to improve your odds of getting accepted or getting past the fit test. So we'll go through these 10, and then we'll finish up the formal part, and we'll move to the informal Q&A. Number 1. Well, this is what I'm going to go through, and I have slides for each one of these. So we're going to go through this in order. 1 idea, 1 paper. Number 2, research selected journals in your field for appropriate fit. And journal quality, who do you want to submit to? Number 3, know the journal, write with the journal's audience in mind. Number 4, I'm going to have some comments about style is key. I'm going to have some comments about length and also the journal's style guide. Number 5, the introduction to your paper is absolutely crucial to the success of your paper, both in the review process and when it's published and read and cited. Number 6, don't overdo it, especially the literature review and tables and tables and tables of results. Number 7, I'm going to advise you to save words for the text, not a long list of references. Number 8, edit, edit, edit. Number 9, in a revision, don't lengthen the paper. And number 10, I have some advice about how you deal with the editor when you get one of those revise and resubmit letters, how you write back to the editor. So let's go through those in order. Number 1 is 1 idea, 1 paper. We are all really smart in academia. We're creative, we have a lot of ideas, we have a lot of things we want to do, especially when we're thinking of what to do as a result of our dissertation and turning our dissertation into a stream of research. And the most common error is to try to do too much in 1 paper. So Relate your research to an open question being discussed or debated in the discipline, and remember, fit for that journal. Editors, yes indeed, want to read a paper that's novel, engaging, interesting, and current, but editors and referees want a paper that's focused. One idea, one paper, absolute clarity. What are you trying to argue? What are you studying? What are you trying to say? How are you trying to advance scholarship along? And the title of your paper, particularly if you're a junior scholar, should not be a murder mystery. It should be a clue to what your paper is about. Does it sound like your title? Does it sound like it's focused on supporting one clear conclusion, or is it a very long title with a lot of questions and a lot of commas? I have a friend who's a scholar in my discipline who has very, very, very clever titles. But she has developed clever titles as a senior scholar just to keep us interested, not as a junior scholar working her way up in the profession. But they're still short. The titles are still short, but they're clever. So be really, really careful when you're talking to colleagues, both here at Stockton and in the larger research community, about your work. It's very, very easy, because you have so many things you would like to do, to try and cram it all into one paper. Remember, more than anything else probably I say today, one idea, one paper. That should be your mantra throughout your career. One idea, one paper. Because if you have two ideas, then you can write two papers. And then more ideas will flow from that, and then your CV will get longer, and then you can work your way up in the profession. Number two, you really do need to research what journals you may want to publish in. And please read my white paper on the Institute for Faculty Development website about this, and about how to document journal quality, and about how to document scholar quality. You need to look at least the last 5 volumes of a bunch of journals that you're thinking of publishing in. What have they been publishing on? What stories are they telling? What research in the sciences are they exploring and pushing the envelope on? Would the journal be open to your scholarship? Look and see. In terms of journal quality, have a serious discussion with mentors and with colleagues about whether you're aiming too high for a journal or too low. Some journals have an acceptance rate of 10%. That means the rejection rate is 9 out of 10 papers that come in. I'm proud to say that my journal has an acceptance rate of 11 to 12%. That is a top journal, but it means we reject more than 8 out of 10 papers that come to us. And a lot of that is for fit. Those are desk rejections or bounces. So you know right away, at least you know faster. Think about the types of journals in your field. Some are very, very general. Some are very specific field journals that publish just on a specific area or sub-area of a discipline. That is appropriate. Think about a journal in the humanities or in the social sciences that reflects a particular theoretical perspective. If you are outside of that perspective, then you have a fit issue, unless they're open to multiple perspectives. So think about that. Are scholars like you likely to read that journal regularly and cite articles from that journal? This is very important, because you are entering a conversation that has been taking place by other scholars for a period of time. And you need to be part of that community and part of that conversation. And just so you know, and this has happened to me and it has happened to many of us, the list of journals for your paper that you're thinking of publishing in, not just for this paper, but for papers over the course of your career, that may change or evolve as you're writing the paper or as you're writing a bunch of papers. And that's okay, because we evolve as scholars, and journals evolve, and editors change, and aims and scope and mission change sometimes. So that's okay. So that's related to number 3, know the journal. You're writing with the journal's audience in mind. Who are the editors? Do you know anything about them? Do you know what they've been writing about? Google them. Read the journal's website. Find out who is on the editorial board, because that's going to give you a clue to the referees. Referees come from editorial boards, and they come from people that know people on editorial boards. Who are previous authors? That is also a clue to referees, because you're entering a conversation, a dialogue in your discipline in terms of advancing scholarship. Yes, it is important to cite articles from prior issues of the journal, but don't stretch. If it's relevant to what you're writing about, you should cite it. But if you're just trying to cite an article from that journal because you're submitting from that journal, referees and editors will pick up on that on the spot. Think about your article as a contribution to an ongoing conversation. I stress this over and over again. Editors and referees find it rude to have a paper come to them that is completely off topic or not germane to what the journal has been doing for volumes, that is to say for years. So don't be rude and don't ignore what others are saying in that journal. That's related to my comment about citing appropriate prior articles. Number 4, style. And this is kind of like when we talk to our students about writing in all of our classes, and we talk about the importance of paragraphs and thesis statements and grammar and style and making arguments, and our students raise their hands if they have nerve, and they say, but is this a W class? Is this a W2 class? And even if it's not, of course, we're academics, we're teacher scholars. The answer is there's writing in all of our classes, and it's important to write well and to write correctly. So style is important for the journal, too. High quality of writing is important to every journal as well. It is really important to keep to a journal's specified length and do not go over it, and this is in the instructions for authors that you will find in the back of a paper journal or on the journal's website. Shorter is even better. And it's really important to follow the journal's style guide. It's like writing a grant proposal where you must follow instructions, chapter and verse, dotting I's, crossing T's. You are entering that conversation. You need to be part of that conversation, and part of it is style, like dressing appropriately for a particular business environment. Look at the section titles. Are they bolded? Are they initial caps? Follow the style sheet, or if there isn't one, follow the journal's style itself. Follow the reference style. Is it APA? Is it Harvard? Is it modified APA? Is the year in parentheses, or is it after the author's name, and is there a period, or is the year after the publisher at the end? Do the references use first names, as some disciplines do, or are they only initials, like other disciplines do? Does the journal use footnotes or endnotes? Do what the style guide says. Follow the journal. Is an abstract requested? If one is requested, you better send it. If they want 75 words, it better be 75 words or less and not 100. Because journal editors have space considerations. Look at the policy on data, on models, on regression, and other quantitative analysis. If the journal is asking for you to open your data to other scholars and write a statement to that effect, you need to do that. If the journal is asking for other things in addition to t-statistics, you need to do that. Do what the journal is asking you to do. Consider acknowledgements. Usually there are not acknowledgements with journal articles like there are if you publish your own book. either a sole-authored, co-authored, or an edited book that has an acknowledgements page. If there aren't acknowledgements in the journal and they're not invited in the style guide and they're not in print, don't use them. I know you have lots of friends and mentors to thank, and you can thank them after you get an acceptance or when your article comes out in print or PDF, and you can send them a nice note that they can also put in their own faculty file because you've helped them. And the paper has to be organized because the first thing the editor is going to do is skim the paper to see if English is used well, if it's an English-speaking journal publishing in English, and if the paper is well organized, or he or she, the editor, may bounce it. Number 5, the introduction is key because everybody reads it first, including the editors and the referees. If the introduction is not written well, if it's not engaging, if it does not fit with the conversation of the journal, editors will stop reading there and it'll get bounced. The typical paper opens with why the topic is important and your key contributions. It's got to be engaging. You're drawing the reader in, almost like you're telling a story or writing a novel. The first few sentences of a novel are key to whether or not somebody's going to turn the page or not. Some journals use the style of the journal, see what other authors are doing. Some journals expect a paragraph summarizing how the manuscript is laid out. In section 1, I do this, and then I do this, and then I do that. Some journals say, no, that's an absolute waste of words and space. We don't have page limits for that. Forget it. Just so you know, there is a page limit and a word limit for every volume of a journal in a journal's contract with the publisher. So that's why I keep talking about space is important. And don't go over your allotted space, your allotted words. The double introduction is another common error, where you have a really nice introduction and then you go on and you proceed to write a second introduction with the background or history of the topic. No, that's a waste of space. If you can't figure out how to say it in the introduction and you can't weave it appropriately into literature review, then it's not important enough for the space. And do not, it depends upon the discipline, of course, but do not necessarily fall into the hackneyed, first I'm going to do an introduction, then I'm going to do a literature review, then I'm going to show my results and analyze them, and then I'm going to have conclusions. That may be appropriate in some disciplines. It may be absolutely expected for some journals and some disciplines. If so, follow it. But typically that is so boring now for editors and for referees to read. Thanks for smiling, Kate. Number 6, don't overdo it. Do a literature review. I know how much you've read in your career. I know how much you know. You know far more than you're able to put in print. Just find another way to share it in classes with your students or with your colleagues or in brown bag lunchtime conversations, but in print, in a journal article, it really must be brief. Embed previous findings, literature review, where appropriate. So sometimes a literature review section, very typical in a dissertation as a chapter or a bunch of sections, is all by itself. In a journal article, it tends to be embedded where appropriate. Is it appropriate in history? Is it appropriate in your presentation of theory or in summary of previous scientific experiments? Is it appropriate in methodology? Are you adding to a previous scholar's methodology or tweaking it in some way? Or maybe when you're talking about your results, it's appropriate to embed it there and say, somebody found this, and notice my hypothesis was this, and I found something slightly different, and here's why I think it's important. And even in a summary or conclusion section, it's also appropriate to cite somebody else's work, particularly if your final section is policy implications. So it's not necessary to have a literature review in a nice little gift box tied up with a string all by itself. You may want to open that box and share those wonderful things embedded in different sections of your paper. It'll make it much more interesting. Also, as I'm sure you know, a journal article does not have 30 tables. There's no room for it in print. Remember, one idea, one paper. That relates to number 7, save words for the text itself, not the references, and especially not the tables or an appendix of tables with all, sometimes you'll see this in journals, but not very often, an appendix with a list of all your variables and the definition of your variables and maybe a sample size or one correlation coefficient or something like that. All of that counts against your word count. And you can say that all those things and supplementary tables in one footnote or an endnote are available from the author. You don't have to put them in print. So it's important to show that you read the literature, you're engaging in this conversation, but reference lists are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Again, I know you know a lot, I know you've read a lot, I know you want to show that, but whatever you put in your references, that's less words that you have toward making your argument. Journal articles over the years, over the decades, have also been getting shorter. I used to be able to write as many as 10,000 words in the social sciences, and I can hold up to you one of my most cited articles that was selected as a best of for a future compendium where the editor specifically allowed me to write 10,000 words. It's hard to get that permission anymore to write 10,000 words, no matter what the discipline. The typical journal article today is 7,000 words. Length, of course, varies by discipline. There are some brilliant articles in the sciences and in mathematics that are just a proof, and they're highly cited, and they're 1 or 2 pages. And that's just as important as anything else that's 10,000 words. I mentioned every word or word equivalent in a table or a chart, a figure, counts against your word limit, and don't play games of citing authors that would be friendly to the paper. Editors catch on to this. Besides, if you cite authors that are friendly to the paper and it's not germane or directly appropriate to the paper, by citing that author, the editor is less likely to send it to her or him as a referee. So it's a delicate balance between who you cite where it's relevant to do so and who you don't cite. Even if you're citing a top scholar in the field because you're engaging in that conversation, just because the top scholar is cited doesn't mean it won't go to her or him as a reviewer, but just don't throw a name in because you think that that'll help you, because typically it won't. So, edit, 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 number 8. Edit, edit, edit for high quality English. Do not depend upon journals employing copy editors. More and more they cannot afford to. Publishers are not paying for that anymore. Make it easy for referees and readers across the globe to understand your paper. We are in global academe, and we have been for years. Readers are going to read your paper from all over the world because the journal is bundled in packages for libraries all over the world, and publishers give discounts to libraries in developing and newly industrializing countries. So you need to enter that conversation, and it's a global conversation. If you're explaining something that is in U.S. public policy, at least say it's in U.S. public policy. Don't assume that it's in the public policy of every country. Don't assume if you're naming a piece of legislation that somebody from every country is going to understand that legislation, even if it's a large piece of legislation with a nickname like Obamacare or welfare reform or something like that. Referees are frustrated with argument flow when the manuscript is poorly written, and we've talked about this, how important writing is. Number 9, this is really vital. It relates to page length again and word length. In a revision, do not lengthen the paper. It's tempting. You feel like you need to. You have to respond to all of these referees. Excuse me. But once you've responded in a revision in the way that you want to respond, look at your word count, and more than likely you're going to have to cut. So you just have to cut. Allow for the time it takes to revise and deal with editors and referees in your career advancement timeline, and that's related to my comment earlier about looking at journals that you want to publish in for quality and fit and have a ranking in your mind, and if you're aiming too high or too low, you might want to adjust. Some journals take 6, 8, 9 months just for the first referee process. The top journals can take a lot of time. The only exception to the word limit rule is when the editor writes you a letter that is a revise and resubmit or an accept subject to making these changes, etc., and the editor has said, look, and they will do this very directly, they will not hint. They will say, you may have up to X number of words, 8,000 words, 8,500 words to do this. Unless you have that letter from the editor with that permission, keep to the original style, manuscript length instruction for authors. Finally, number 10 in my top 10 list, and this, let me say what it is first. Include a letter to the editor in a revision when you send your manuscript back in. And let me say that when you've finished revising a manuscript, you've done all of this work, you are so proud of it, you are anxious to send it off again because you really think it's going to get accepted this time. The last thing you want to do, and I've been through this, is write a long letter to the editor, which is also, by the way, to the referees, explaining what you did between the first version and the second version. Because that letter itself can be 500 words. Because you are writing to the editor saying, the referees asked me to do this. Oh, and by the way, you should do it by referee. Outline any changes to the manuscript you made in terms of argument, ideas, results, and you're going to say, referee 1 asked me to do this, I did this. But you're not going to say it generally. You're going to say, note on page 2, I did this. At the bottom of page 8, I did this, and here's why. And you're doing this long letter to the editor, commenting to every referee in the same letter. And it's the journal editor's responsibility to take that letter that you wrote explaining how you changed the manuscript and decide whether to send your whole letter to each of the referees, because if referees disagree, referees need to see what each one may have asked versus another, or the editor may cut your cover paragraph to the editor with referee your comments to referee 1 and send that off to referee 1. May do the same thing to referee 2, send that off, and the same for referee 3. Typically, though, when you write back to an editor that says, here's what I did for each of these referees, the editor will send the whole thing to the referees with the new manuscript because it does help us as referees. It gives us a sense of what other referees wanted you to do, and it's going to help us read the manuscript the second time. And this final piece of advice, every once in a while, perhaps, depending upon how senior you are, but rarely, if ever, should you complain to the editor in an email or a letter or a phone call about a decision that the editor has made and ask that the paper be sent to an additional referee. If you want to do this, please get advice from a friend, a mentor, a colleague, perhaps another editor. And please have a very, very good case, just like a student with a grade grievance, that it's absolutely wrong, differential, discriminatory treatment. Because that is the only way a student wins one of our grade grievances, if there's clear and convincing evidence of differential treatment, because academic judgment stands. So this is academic judgment, just like in the tenure and promotion process. It is academic judgment of referees and of editors about what they do or do not want to do with your work. So just try, it's hard, but try to eat humble pie, which tastes much worse than pumpkin or apple pie. And I do have those bitter taste buds in my mouth because I've been through this. I wouldn't say anything to you that I have not been through. I have stacks of rejection letters. In fact, before the internet and before computers really became desktop and laptop phenomenons, I wish I had saved some of my old rejection letters. Because sometimes, because I was a budding feminist economist, my work was really trashed. And those rejection letters themselves could be published today, and they would be very interesting for literary scholars to deconstruct. So try to eat humble pie. Try not to complain, because there's always going to be another journal or another editor that may be appropriate for your work as well. Try not to just think that there's one journal out there. There are thousands. So I think that's it. And I thank you, and this concludes the formal part of the presentation.